Hey everybody, it's Tuesday, May 27th, 2014, and here we are in DCMOOC. It's week 3. This is the core session, and it's great to see everyone here participating. This is the first core session of the week. We'll have another one tomorrow if you miss it. Of course, this will be archived. It's currently being recorded, and it's great to see everybody here. So last week we talked about a number of things around sort of the basics of digital citizenship and what that means, and we really framed it around a positive setting, really looking specifically at how we can actually create positive digital identities for our students, and and that's a huge part of digital citizenship is developing positive and safe identities, and of course building cultures and safe spaces for everyone. So that's been great, and yeah, and I think the people are already saying where they're from, so that's a great way to start. So if you haven't said already in the chat where you're from tonight, I'd love to hear it. So please feel free to say hello. We've got Calgary, Chicago, Irma, South Carolina, Saskatoon, La Pampa, Argentina, amazing, Waterloo, Saskatoon, Moose Jaw, Rocky Mountain House, Alberta, Prince Albert, Estevan, Unity, Saskatchewan. So these things are just great. New South Wales, Australia. I've never been to that part. I've been to NSW, but never to Albury. Melville, New Brunswick, Farmington. Fantastic. Kenosee, yes. Major, Saskatchewan. Awesome. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. All right, so we're going to get right into it. Just don't want to waste too much time here, but it's great to see everyone there. And feel free to, that chat room there is really important to use. And by the way, if you're having trouble with the chat going by really fast, a little tip I shared last week was that you can actually pull that chat window out and make it bigger. So you can detach the window. So just drag the top of the chat bar and you can move it anywhere onto the screen. And that'll allow you to actually move it anywhere, and you should be able to see the entire chat. So that should be useful to you anyway. So again, thanks everyone for being here. Okay, so on with the content. I just want to give you a quick overview of DCMOOC so far. First of all, I want to get some crowdsourcing happening here, and there's about 61 of you, so this could look like chaos. But what I'm going to ask you to do is, somewhere on this white space, if you can click on the whiteboard, I believe you have access to the whiteboard, grab a pen, and you can actually just click on that little toolbar, click where it has the letters, and then you can just click somewhere on the screen and just type what you've learned so far. And you can either do that in the chat room or you can do it right on the whiteboard. So what have you learned? Yeah, unfortunately, there's no whiteboard for iPad users, but for those people who are but for iPad users, you do have the chat, so feel free to add it there as well. It just doesn't add to the visual. So great to hear. I've learned that I have so much to learn. I guess that's the way it should be, I think, in some ways. A huge umbrella for computers and manners, etc., and I think that's really very true. If someone learned about Flipboard, so there are tools being used, and it was great to see in the chat that Susan asked about Flipboard in the chat and was given an answer really quickly. That New Things Matter, incredible online PD source. You've learned about MOOCs, can be amazing. I'm glad that you're finding them amazing. New apps, new perspectives, Google Plus, and how to turn off notifications. Yeah, so people, if you are in the Google Plus and you are inundated by so many notifications in your email, there is a really quick way to turn those off so you don't have to be inundated by them, and you can just go in there and click. There's a little bell up in the top left corner, and you can turn that off. Blogging reminders. Power of blogging, I think it's amazing, especially if you're able to tweet it out and get an audience. To have an online identity so that I have something to model with my students, I think that's a great point. So many places start with bringing digital citizenship in the classrooms and home, but starting is key, and I would absolutely say that. Digital citizenship issues are already being integrated into the world's curriculum. It's high time we include it in ours. That's great. Awesome stuff. So this is, this is really kind of a cool thing that we can see so many great perspectives here on the board. There are some great ones over in, huge effects, kids from birth. Awesome. Let's see. What else do we have here? News perspective on digital citizenship. There are more and more examples of good and bad digital citizenship every day. Lost the whiteboard. DC isn't about teaching D, but about integration into what we teach in data schools. By the way, if you do lose the panes and the whiteboards, if you're on a desktop machine, you can go to the Tools menu, or wait, let me just check. So if you lose things from time to time, I believe you can go to View, the View menu, and click where it says Restore Default Layout. So View, Default, Restore Default Layout, and sometimes that helps. And hopefully you're doing okay with Blackboard Collaborate. So I'm going to switch, so just finish up what you're writing there, and I'm going to switch to the next window. Thanks so much. This is great. This is cool, very cool visual here. Awesome. Okay. All right, so I'm going to move on. Thank you for that one. I'm going to ask you yet another question. So what will you do with what you have learned? And I think that's a really key question, in all professional learning. So with some of the things that you've learned, do you have an action plan at this point? What sort of, some of you have answered that question already. Spread the word. Fantastic. Write more blog posts. I think blogging is such an underrated piece in all of this. Being able to reflect your online is huge. Dean Shuresky, great, a really great teacher. He says, he asked the question of many of his teachers that he works with. He simply says, where can I find your best learning online, or where can I find your best stuff online? And I think blogging is such a huge part of that. To share with other teachers, educate myself, educate coworkers, educate my students. And I think that's really the great part of a MOOC, is you can participate, but you can also, you can move on and allow other people to learn from you as well. You become the expert. Immerse myself in, I missed that other part. I'll incorporate it in my reviewing of material. I've already been asked to share all this while doing some research about digital citizenship in my region. There's an appetite for practical ideas, not for theory. Exactly. So I'm hoping that we're going to share a lot of that, and there's been a lot of the practical ideas shared, certainly in the in places like the Google Plus community for sure. Share with others, communicate. I love seeing this. Continue learning and sharing online using Twitter, blogs, Google, and really, when it comes down to it, all of you, even by being here tonight, are modeling this positively. So I think that's just a fantastic idea. Getting a blog started finally. It's never too late. So let's see. I'll try to expand a few of these things so I can see more what's going on here. Perfect. All right. Again, thanks for your sharing. For this, I'm just going to make a couple of these things bigger. I think I can do that. There we go. And by the way, if some of you get boxes like the drop-down boxes, if you click twice on the little A, sometimes you can make it so it just writes text that doesn't have the boxes. Not that there's anything wrong with the boxes, it's just a bit different. And I'm going to open these up so I can expand it and take a screenshot in a bit here. Great. Well, thanks. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next one. So if you can finish up writing, and we'll get into a couple of other things here. So. All right, so really quick ways, again, this is a bit of a review, ways that you can be engaging. I'm going to have Katya, she's going to drop in some links. So most of you who have been here before know these links. It's not a bad idea to bookmark these things. These are some of the spaces. So first of all, I think it's really important to check out some of the other online sessions that we do in Blackboard Collaborate. This one, for instance, is repeated. It's going to be repeated again tomorrow. And there's also, so there's a core session. So typically every Tuesday night at 7 o'clock p.m. Mountain Time, we are doing this session, and then the next day we do one at about 3:45 Mountain Time. Tomorrow there's actually a bonus session, Digital Citizenship in the Classroom at 7 o'clock p.m. Mountain Time, 9 p.m. Eastern. You shouldn't miss that. This is Kathy Cassidy doing some great things with elementary. We also have a Twitter chat on Thursday, which has been really successful. Oh, no audio? How about now? Can you hear me now? Test, test, test. Okay. I bet you I'm chipmunking right now. Big lag. Okay. Yes, this happens with Blackboard. At least it should get you there anyway. All right, so hopefully you can hear me okay, and hopefully it's not. So yeah, it would be really, really great if you can join Kathy Cassidy because it's fantastic. I'm back. Yeah, that seems to happen from time to time. I'll let my voice catch up in a second here. The nice thing about Blackboard Collaborate is usually when it cuts out, you don't lose the sound. It just chipmunks everything to kind of catch up. It does sound a little bit strange. Donna Fry in the chat just noticed, by the way, she's talking about OSSE MOOC. In Ontario, we are studying digital citizenship by reading Dana Boyd's It's Complicated. That's a really fantastic book. And by the way, so it's a great one to share. Thank you, Donna, for doing that. And free, if you click on that link, you should be able to find a free PDF of that book. I would certainly recommend it to anyone. So thanks for sharing that. This is the spirit of this particular MOOC. So thank you very much. So we do have these live sessions. Of course, all of the sessions are archived. So if you miss something, you can go to the archives. And there's a link to the archives there. And of course, if you haven't got on Twitter yet, it's really, really great to click on Twitter and try it. There's a hashtag that we are using. It's DCMOOC. We will give you all sorts of support if you just decide to, try it. Katya has dropped a link there that should take you specifically to the hashtag search. So if you have an account, one of the great things that you could be doing right now is clicking on that hashtag search, get a sense of what people are saying about DCMOOC. And what I would do certainly is, especially if you don't have many followers or you're not following many people, I would click on the people that are talking about DCMOOC. And in many cases, what you can do is actually follow people and start to build up your network. If you have any questions about this MOOC or anything related to the MOOC, feel free to use DCMOOC as the hashtag. It's a really great way to connect to others. And I would say that when we do it this way, what you're doing is you're really connecting globally in a very public space. So obviously act appropriately and model that particular piece. We also, if you haven't used already, a couple of things here. If you haven't used TweetDeck, TweetDeck is a really fantastic tool, and the link will be there in a second. Okay, yeah. So TweetDeck will come, it's really a great tool. And you'll notice also there's another chat hashtag, and that's for our DCM chat, which is every Thursday we use a different hashtag just for those chats that are scheduled at a particular time. And this is just an example. The screenshot you're seeing here is the way I use my TweetDeck. I put it where mentions, like in the left-hand column, I have mentions where anyone that uses my Twitter handle, Carosa, it'll show up there. If anyone is using the hashtag DCMOOC, it'll show up there in the middle one, and then anyone using DCM chat. So this is the way I get to see Twitter, and it's just so much of a more efficient tool to actually look at multiple hashtags, and it's really fantastic. I did mention last week, and I know a few people who got on it finally kind of get Twitter for the first time, and I can tell by people in the chat right now, there's a lot of people who really, really love it. Dave, for instance, great tool for chats, multitasking at its best. So yeah, exactly, Dave. I would totally agree with you there. And of course, if you haven't had a chance, do register for the or drop into the semi-private DCMOOC Google Plus community. One of the things to notice in this screenshot on the left-hand side, as was noted by a couple of people in slides, a few slides back, is that when you sign up for this, you're going to get a lot of notifications of people posting, and that's going to go to your email. So what you can do is you can see where it says notifications on to the left top-hand corner, right above the child with the iPod, which happens to be one of my daughters. You can click on that little red bell, and that can turn off the notifications altogether. So that's, if you're really worried about a lot of notifications, you can totally turn that off. And then it just allows you, like, I would still go in there, kind of surf through the different posts because it's there's a lot there. But don't think that you have to answer every post. If you go in there and you see something that resonates with you and you have something to add, it's a really, really fantastic community, and it's going to be, it's probably, to me, is going to be one of the most important parts of this MOOC, is to get in there and start to participate. I'm seeing some fantastic collaboration out there. So lots of ways to engage. You don't have to use any of these, but the more you use and the ones you want to try, I think it also provides, you some, not only learning from people involved in this MOOC, but also to, to learn some of these tools to a greater extent as well. And so thanks for everyone for using Google Plus and Twitter and a lot of these other, and of course coming to the session tonight. Okay, so let's think about this topic about developing positive digital identities. And this is really a big part of it. So first of all, I want to talk about some precautions and background. So I need some help from you. So in terms of you as teachers, many of you are teachers here, what are your guidelines for student privacy? What are sort of the maybe common sense rules, or the way that you actually, so feel free to write on this slide, click on the little A. So what are your guidelines, your common sense guidelines for student privacy when using social media? So what are your, and people have it very different. Every district is very different, but I'd love to see sort of what sort of things you use to maintain student privacy, because I think before you even start thinking about digital citizenship and developing student identities, you really have to have at least some guidelines around student privacy. And of course, in many cases, this also goes for your own children. For those of you who have young children and you're posting them on the Facebook and so on, it's good to have some sort of ideas. So for instance, some people are saying no faces and names with pictures, no posting last names. Some people will do posting a first name with a last initial, keep personal information private. I'm actually in Ontario today, and one of the things that we noticed with their social media policy rollout in Peel District is, for instance, there's an urging, I guess, guidelines around their own posting, is that they don't want teachers to post anything personal, not personal tweets, or not in the same as a professional account. So some people, in terms of their own guidelines, in terms of districts, sometimes they want you to separate personal from professional, which is sometimes difficult to do, sometimes hard, but these are some of the guidelines we have. Someone mentioned we have district guidelines we need to follow, have to go by parent permission, can't put student's last name, have to blur out student space if we can't get permission. It's also very different from province to province. Some provinces have very different, and of course state to state, school to school, private schools versus public schools, very different permissions right across the board. So I think it's really important, but over 13 encourage first and last names to develop digital identity and promote accountability. So that's an interesting one. Nothing identifies where the student lives, no phone numbers, etc. That would be known as personally identifiable information versus personal information. Those are two different things in law. Keep comments positive. Okay, good. So lots of really good things, especially, so basically, for the most part, guidelines around privacy, keeping information safe, which is sometimes difficult to do. Where do you think your student identities currently exist? So in what spaces, and I don't know how old your students are because I'm sure it ranges, but what are the most popular spaces that student identities currently exist, or where do they exist online? So Facebook, obviously, Snapchat, Facebook, and more. Instagram is becoming incredibly popular. Vine is becoming popular. Twitter, and I mentioned in the session last week that the average age of social media maturity, which means the age that young people graduate from Club Penguin to something like Facebook or Twitter, is about 11 years of age. So, that means that students certainly at the age of even 9 years old, it would not be uncommon to have these particular spaces. And so this is one of the reasons I think having students assess their own digital portfolios is really a big deal. Some people are, mention like things like that are seen to be more private, like Kik, Tumblr, for instance, Snapchat, which certainly purports to be more private, WhatsApp, which is owned by Facebook now. Someone says Snapchat is a spawn of the devil. We did talk about that last week. It's good and bad. It does provide at least the promise of privacy, but certainly not privacy. It does provide some spaces for students to make mistakes in slightly a safer space than some other places. But some people also say that it promotes bad behavior and inappropriate sharing. Joanne D1, where it says, I missed that we can add our comments to the slide. If you are on a desktop computer, you can simply click on the little toolbar to the left of the whiteboard. And if you're on the iPad, unfortunately, there's no way for the iPad. I didn't read your last sentence. So it doesn't work on the iPad, but you can add your comments to the chat for sure. So it's just kind of a nice, Minecraft is a huge thing. And not only that, I'm running into actually a number of grade 3 aged, mostly boys, but sometimes girls, who are creating YouTube videos that, basically are Minecraft tutorials, which is really a pretty neat thing in many cases, and usually a very positive thing. All right, so one particular example of, and this is actually a Saskatchewan one, a Saskatchewan link, and it actually links to a video. We're not going to watch this right now, but for instance, this is actually a fairly helpful one, especially because the majority of people here are from Saskatchewan because of the nature of this particular MOOC. But this is actually useful for right across. It's about a 5-minute video. It's one that I would say that's fairly safe for students and something that's not totally unreasonable. And it basically gets students to really reassess where they're posting online to make the right decisions around it. I think with some guidance, this is actually a really, really good resource in terms of sharing this particular video with students. And it is shared there. I'm going to get you to watch something a little bit different. It's a bit more tongue-in-cheek. It's and I think it's a little bit odd. So this is, if Katia will post this video. So if you can watch this video, and it's like a minute or so long, and when you're done, just come right back here and we'll just discuss this kind of video. And sorry if it's a little bit offensive, but it's meant to be sort of this sort of fun infomercial in some sense. So if you can click that link. All right, so I think most of you got a chance to see it. Yeah, it's not bad. I mean, if you want to use it with students, you probably have to assess first of all their their sort of their maturity, I guess, in that particular piece. There's actually, if you look on YouTube, there's a number of actually really good PSAs, public service announcements, especially when things that students post online. But what I really like about this is it's user generated. It's something that a student. Yeah, I think some people would for sure, and they'd find some, kind of fun with this. But it's a good segue into a conversation around this type of thing, because it's a dramatization of what occurs very often, and it's a kind of a far out exaggeration. Sometimes, like the video that I showed, or that we linked to, sorry. The video that we linked to right before, the one from the Saskatchewan Privacy Commissioner, was a lot more serious. Although it was done kind of in a trendy little way, it was a lot more serious. So as you know, sometimes students need to kind of have a little bit of humor that allows them to get into what's a very serious piece. So I think something like this could actually be quite useful in a number of different ways. And it, just to bring in a little humor into something that can be a very serious. So as you said, like grade 9 and 10, it might hit home in particular places. As Katia mentioned, like I like the SAS Privacy Commissioner one, but it's more serious, I guess, in a way. But knowing what your kids will react to and how you can start the conversation obviously is a very, very personal thing. And so, yeah, and exactly as Kelly says, it's just like the Star Wars Kid. That's almost exactly what happened to the Star Wars Kid, which was mentioned last week, where something was posted and ended up being seen by millions, and all of a sudden your identity becomes a big part of this. So this is not in any way not something that could be quite true, and that doesn't happen quite often. So I think that was kind of a useful thing. So that's where the discussion starts. There's also one of the things that's really quite important, and I can actually share this. I'll share the Google Doc with all of these links, by the way, at the end of the session. But for instance, there is a difficulty of removing digital footprints. So I mentioned this briefly last week, but if you don't know, it's actually it's important to start to think of what's going on out there. So there are a lot of people that end up with bad digital identities and getting a sense of what actually. Yeah, so the difference between a footprint and an identity, I think a footprint or many footprints are what ultimately makes up an identity. So a footprint is, what you created, an artifact, a news article about you, like all of the single artifacts that make up what's larger would be your identity. So how people perceive the artifacts and how they put together your character would be more on the side of identity. And so I think that's something to consider. So that, yeah, exactly. Footprints, what you leave behind. It's not necessarily you, but it glimpses into your personality. And I think that's really important too. So with EU here, for instance, what's kind of interesting right now, so this is happening in the European Union, that Google, the European Union has guided Google to say, we must respect the right to be forgotten, that digital footprints could be erased from some users, because we know that it's very, very difficult, if not impossible, to remove certain content because we don't know where it's hosted. Sometimes digital footprints are outside of the legislation or legal authority of servers from where the country that they affect the individual. There's no for sure way to get down things, and obviously it's not always hosted by a company. Like for instance, if something like ended up like the Flame Fart Kid thing ended up on YouTube, it doesn't mean that YouTube owns it or controls it. Anyone who downloads it from YouTube using a service like keepvid.com could have it on a personal computer and could already upload it later. So it's not companies that necessarily own the artifacts once they're online, that individuals actually keep it, make copies, and so on. So really, really important. Nona Barker, that's a really great example. So for instance, she mentioned a tool called Google Alerts. So if you have a fairly easy and unique name, a great tool, for instance, to kind of manage what's being said. It's actually not meant for a digital identity tool, but some people are using it as a digital identity tool. It allows you to basically create a custom search, and then every time there's new, there's something new found in that search, it'll email you to say there's something new about Alec Coros, so there's something new about someone else. And I think that's really kind of a useful thing to, anything where you can actually manage your digital identity. So thanks for that sharing that one. I think that's a really important one for sure. All right, next one. Let's go to the next slide here. So some resources for understanding digital footprints. Now this is not, again, I think there's a differentiation between footprints and what makes up ultimately your identity. So we'll Okay, it just bumped me up for a second. Can you hear me again? Test 1 2 3. All right, great. Okay, yeah, it does at the odd time. I'm on hotel Wi-Fi in Toronto, downtown Toronto, so that's probably the issue. It does happen, but I'm glad you can hear me now. So yeah, UBC's is quite good. This is from the University of British Columbia, and Katia, if she hasn't already, if she can post that again. This is actually quite a good one. It focuses very much on digital citizenship, and yeah, so it's actually quite of a useful site. Another great one to look at, and here's a link for this one. This is actually Common Sense Media, which is more US centered, but it's actually a really fantastic site with lots of really great resources. Now, one we're going to get into especially next week. This is a Canadian resource, and they've done a lot of research on digital literacy and media literacy, and they used to be called the Media Awareness Network, and now they're called Media Smarts. And Media Smarts, I believe the Saskatchewan government is looking at, they're at least looking at, I can't say if it's specifically done yet or not, but they're looking at for a province-wide subscription to this. I know many other jurisdictions and schools are using this particular resource in Canada. So yeah, in the US, Common Sense Media is much more popular. In Canada, Media Smarts is quite popular. As Natalie mentioned, she uses it in their division. So there's a lot of really good stuff there, and much of it is research-based. So I would start with those three sites: Common Sense Media, Media Smarts, and the UBC Digital Footprint one. And I think some of you would have been familiar with these sites already, but it's not a bad idea to go back into them. I know with Media Smarts, they've recently reached, or they published a fairly recent report that actually links a lot to what young Canadians feel in terms of their own self-advocacy towards digital tools, and I think it's quite useful too. So, and it is bilingual as well. So the concept of e-portfolios, and I think this is really an important tool that we're seeing here. So e-portfolios is, we're seeing this from province to province, state to state, even though in the light of other initiatives around standardized testing and different types of assessment, we're seeing still the relevance of e-portfolios, especially in the ability to develop rich student artifacts, assessment artifacts, but because of the digital assessment piece that we're seeing in many spaces, we're seeing this also as a way to help students develop positive digital identities throughout their school career. First of all, I think one of the first things that you may consider, and this would be, you want to think developmentally. Now, this would probably be more appropriate for high school students, grade 10 to 12, I would say. It probably more on the later ones that are looking to go to university. This is also very, very useful to university students as well, or those who are looking for some sort of type of career. The two splash page providers, there's two of them. One would be About Me. I have an example of this. So yeah, so Katia has actually put the two up there. And what an About Me page does, and I'll just show you an example of mine, it's actually a good place for basically allowing you to have a number of different, your social media sites all linked to one particular space. It becomes a bit of a digital business card, and it's really, really super easy to use. Basically what you end up doing is, adding a photograph, adding all of your social media sites, and creating a bit of a portfolio, and it kind of, looks at okay, I should be back now. It keeps on bumping me out, but at least it's only for a couple seconds. Hopefully this will work. Lost in the Parthenon. I'm back though, right? Toronto isn't paying their Wi-Fi bill for sure. That's what I heard all day. I'm glad it's only for a couple seconds here and there. So that is the pleasures of web conferencing and poor Wi-Fi. So yeah, easy to format. This is actually a really nice site to use. And again, the question is, like, are you the same person across all of these spaces? And for my undergrads, at least, we really assess, you know, their identity in a lot of different spaces, because you want to manage a sense of integrity across all different spaces, and I think that's really, really important. So it's a good conversation starter in many cases. Another one that's quite popular is something called Flavors Me, and it's quite easy to use. Same sort of idea. You basically upload a photograph, and it creates a really nice digital profile. Now, there's not a lot of content, so I wouldn't call these things e-portfolios at all, but it's that personal splash page that can allow you to do something like this. Now, if you are more of a hacker geek, you can actually, if you use WordPress.com and you are, or sorry, WordPress, not the .com version, the WordPress.org, if you self-host your own WordPress site, what you can actually end up doing is getting a theme that's very much like this, and then you can emulate something like this, which is quite good. So that's a good place to do it as well. Now, more generally, when you look at e-portfolios, what are the purpose, first of all, of e-portfolio? So what I'd like you to do is answer this question, like, what is the point, for an e-portfolio? I'm not sure how many people are using it, but feel free to grab the whiteboard tool, and I'd like to hear from you in terms of why are we using e-portfolios? Highlight your skills, showcasing, highlight learning, highlight work, opportunity to share with others. Yeah. Have a place to collect online learning that I'm doing, share learning, great archive, and I love the archive of growth and looking at those sorts of things. I love what Kelly says, because the resume doesn't say it all. And I think we're seeing that there's actually been a number of articles from Forbes that talks about how your online identity is actually replacing your CV or your resume. And I think that's a really important piece there that we're seeing that. Rhonda Jensen just linked to something that I think is probably pretty interesting too, about reclaiming your digital data. That stuff is really important too. Show growth, digital expression, career portfolio, showcasing skills, lots of really great things to use them on for sure. Awesome. Yeah, reflection. I think reflection becomes a huge thing that we don't often do. That's why I really like blogs for teachers, because it does allow for the reflective practitioner. My voice is all over the place, isn't it? Some people use the digital, as Amy says. I'm pretty sure my digital portfolio got me the job. That's fantastic. And where did you do that portfolio again? Oh yeah, it was my class, Amy. That's right. Awesome. I'm glad that helped a little bit. Okay, so here's an example, and I think, just to take a look at this really, really quickly, Katya, if you don't mind just putting, this is an example of a undergraduate portfolio. This is a pre-service teacher, Beth Kellen. What I love about this is, okay, if you can, there you go. So take a look at that portfolio. So if you can click on the link where you see what Katya shared there, take a look what that portfolio looks like. What I love about this is, there's a lot going on here. This is a great teacher portfolio. In this particular one, you're not going to see a lot of images. It's a lot of text. Some people choose portfolios that end up being very little visibly about who you are, and there's all sorts of reasons not to show your identity in terms of photos and that sort of thing, but you get resume and so on. Now, one of the really interesting things that this was actually one of Casios' students, I believe. What I really liked about this particular one is if you look under, for instance, the category ECS 300 and look at the subpage under ECS 300. So if you're on that portfolio, ECS 300, and click where it says Final Reflection. And just an example of this particular post, and maybe I can go to that post in particular. I guess you can't see it. So ECS 300 and then Final Reflection. And I'll see if I can actually just post that in here, and that should take you right to that particular space. One of the things Katia noticed about this particular piece is it's reflecting back to your growth. Like if you look at those highlights, those particular, it says C week 6 reflection. This is one of those great things about portfolios that allows you to really demonstrate your growth. And so there's a lot of great spaces in here as well. Hopefully you can still hear me. But it's worthwhile. These are things that are really quite useful to growth. Now obviously this is an undergrad version of it, but this idea here is actually very, very doable. This is a WordPress-based one. And what you have here is a number of showcasing pages. Like the pages actually end up being showcases. Like for instance, letters of introductions, teaching philosophy, guiding and inspiring. You have things related to coursework, such as ECS 300. You have the more, the resume pieces, which are quite useful. You have questions around, about me. But there's also blogging in here as well, which really provides that reflecting piece. So I think that's an important one. Now I'll give you one more example. This is actually, this is a more recent one. I may have shared this last week, but I think it's important to take a look at this one. This is markrenier.ca, and what I love about this is he decided to pay the $18 a year to buy his web domain. And that's becoming more of a popular thing as well, to actually go out there and purchase your domain. And this is something that's been done, by high school students in some cases, where you actually see students willing to buy their own domain. If you do something like at WordPress.com, you can actually buy your domain. But you can even see the same sort of idea. This is there's a lot of places you can buy your domain. In this particular case, he just went to WordPress.com, signed up for a free blog, and then one of the options is to basically host it with a domain through WordPress.com. It ends up being a little bit more expensive than if you buy your domain just outright. I think it's $12 a year, but for $18 a year, you get the free host or the hosting as well. So it's not a bad deal actually. And if you think about it, for $18 a year, and I'm not saying this is the one place to buy it. For $18 a year, you're basically buying a little piece of the web that's all yours. And I think it's a deal in that case. You're buying a name. And so it's not that difficult. As I mentioned last week, there's one university at least that's doing this for their students. They're actually purchasing domain names and hosting it, and that's the University of Mary Washington, which is a really great idea to basically buy a domain and host it for students and really think about their own identity. So I think that's a really cool piece there when you do that sort of thing. And another good example of that. Now, in terms of the artifacts, and we're going to talk to you in a second about the artifacts here that you can purchase or that you can make. Now, in my undergraduate classes, one of the things that we do is we create these things called summary of learning. If you went to YouTube, you don't need to do that now, but if you go to YouTube, you can actually see tons of these different summaries of learning. I'm going to show you a quick one here. See if I can just find this one on YouTube. Okay, so this is sort of an undergraduate one here, but I'm going to give you an example. of a couple of pre-service teachers that they're actually doing a summary of learning, and what they're doing is they're having a little bit of a fun with it. So if you can watch this video for about the first, say, 2 minutes, and then when 2 minutes is up, come back here, and it just kind of gives you an idea of how someone might begin a summary of learning. So what they do here is they sing a little song, then they go to sort of a more in-depth. All right, that's probably all you need to see right now anyway. You can come back. Yeah, so if there are others, like Shelby, for instance, is sharing a portfolio. So any way that you can share portfolios, that was great. Yeah, it's kind of fun. And it does show the fun in learning, and I think that's not a horrible thing in many cases. So it could have been. Yeah. It's a lot of fun, and those students actually did vlogs for a lot of what they did for the classes. And obviously, a lot of students that are doing fun things and doing other things that are not related to their identity. And this is it's a kind of a cool and fun one. You're right, Susan. Learning should be fun, and I think we don't stress it enough. And I don't think we, in any case, like I want to, if I were a superintendent or a director, those are the types of teachers I'd want to to hire. Someone who's having a lot of fun, who does this stuff responsibly. They never said anything that was inappropriate. They've got a really strong digital identity, and it's just really kind of a, obviously you get the personality there. So as Stephen, as a principal there, these are the kinds of people you want in your school, and that's a really important thing. So those searches aren't going to be bad for those guys at all, and really, really kind, appropriate, good teachers, and it was really kind of neat, and it's very apparent there. So it's a lot of fun. Oh, that was this one here. Sorry about that. So what we're going to do is a bit of an activity. So are most of you familiar with Google Docs? And so this is going to be, we're going to try something a little bit different here. So basically what Google Docs is it's, well, so most of you do, cool. So basically it's just like an online, it's an online Word doc. And so what I'm going to try to do here is I'm going to do something in Blackboard Collaborate that allows me to create breakout rooms. And we're going to create 8 breakout rooms. So what we're going to do is I'm going to create these breakout rooms. So just for a little bit, what we're going to do is you're going to be zoomed over into a breakout room. Now, what you're going to see in a second is a document that looks something like this. Now, there's not going to be 10 breakout rooms. There's going to be 8. So if you're in room 8, I'd like you to click on where it says room 8, and you're going to see a Google Doc with a couple of questions. The questions are going to ask you 2 things. The first question is going to be, one second. So you're going to see a document. It's just taking a second to load, and it's going to ask you 2 questions. So I'm going to ask you, first of all, what kind of artifacts might students include in an e-portfolio? And what tools could students use to create, store, and share the artifacts? And I'd love to hear from you. So in a second here, you are going to be, oh yeah, and there's elementary, there is middle years, and there's also secondary. So you may want to see where it's appropriate for those particular spaces. And collectively, we're going to start to share a bunch of different things, but I want to see how it is to collaborate in this space. So again, I'm going to zoom you to a room. Feel free to just go on to the document. So you should have a numbered group in a second. So here we go. I'm going to zoom you there. 8 rooms. Give me a second. Create breakout rooms. 8. And then I'm going to go create. And then it's going to send you to one in 1 second, I think. I've never done this before. Send, allow, create breakout rooms. Everyone's gone? Yeah. There. Okay, take a look. Oh yeah, they did it. All right. Testing 1, 2, 3. All right, so you should be able to hear me again. So yeah, thanks for doing that. I was actually just taking a look at some of the docs. I'm going to see if I can go back into it. You should be able to hear me now. Does everyone hear me okay? You can still be in the Google Doc. Feel free to continue on in there, but I just want to make sure you can hear me. So what did you think of that? Was it kind of weird? Great. So, and that's just kind of a cool, yeah, it actually worked. That was kind of cool, hey? Yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't grade on the iPad. Yeah. Cool, I'm glad you're able to do that. So there was a lot of different things. Yeah, and you know, those are the sorts of things. If you think about that, right now you were sitting there on a Google Doc collaborating with 8 or 10 other people from around the world. There's a lot of different things. If you go back to the document, what we'll try to do is compile all of those things and then put them in one document. But it's just it's really kind of a great thing to be able to do that sort of thing. And I guess with something like that, it basically just sends you to a group. We can actually have, like in this Blackboard Collaborate, you can have actually small groups to talk about particular things. But in this particular case, you're right. It doesn't always have to be synchronous too, and that's a huge thing, Ted. I think it's incredibly important that you can do this sort of thing in many different ways. So it's kind of a fun there. So keep that main document there where it has the list of room 1 to 8. Keep that, and we'll try to actually compile those in one little place. And you've got a lot of really cool ideas there. So in the chat, what are some of the things that under the first question? What are some of the tools that you would use? What are some of the artifacts that you might include? So what are the things that you thought were interesting from the ones that you saw there? So let's put those in the chat for now, just some of your favorite ones. So the question number 1. Yeah, metacognition, that's a huge one. Reflection, I'm a big fan of the reflection piece for sure. Collaboration. So some of those ones. Teaching is learning, goal setting. There, in some districts they actually have very, very specific questions to answer within e-portfolios. I noticed there was some within Ontario today. I was in reporting home. Okay, so now that we have some of the things that you would put in it, roles and relationships. What about, so what sort of tools or places that you'd store the artifacts? So those who are using this, and of course you're creating a digital footprint, what are some of those? So Google Docs is a huge thing, wikis for sure, Google Drive, which is one of my favorite, Google Apps for Education, as Kelly said, that's GAFE, G-A-F-E, blogs, Adobe Portfolios, Haiku Deck, of course, Live Binders, Weebly, Google Apps for Education. Some of the things that we worked on today is actually things like, explain everything, and a lot of tools where you can actually talk about your own learning in different places. So a lot of iPad apps that may have been there. YouTube is a huge thing, obviously, which is a big deal. And so I think one of the biggest things is many of these things are not owned by the institution. And I think that's a big deal. When people, use things like Evernote and YouTube, sometimes we control them by the institution, but a lot of the tools that were mentioned here were mentioned, these are personal accounts that people are using. Certainly teachers can use these things as well, but many that they're, personal accounts, and they're kind of all over the place, and that's kind of an important thing too. So some of the e-portfolio platforms that we're seeing, and I'm not sure, when we look at platforms, there's a lot of different things that people are using. So for instance, one of the things that you see certainly more prevalent in Ontario, parts of the US, is, and I know certainly places in Australia when I visited, that there's something called D2L. It's an e-portfolio tool. There's also something from New Zealand called Mahara, which is actually something that people use portfolios on. Now, these can be private or public, but the other people will use WordPress-based ones. And so, for instance, one of the things that I really like is something like WordPress.com, which you saw the other examples. KidBlog is a great place to use it. That's also a WordPress-based tool. EduBlogs is also WordPress. So if you think about KidBlog, WordPress.com, and EduBlogs, which edublogs.org, those are all WordPress-based portfolios. The great thing about these is, for instance, KidBlog can be very much teacher-controlled, and certainly things like WordPress.com or EduBlog certainly can be also teacher-controlled. Especially with EduBlogs, you can get like a campus account. In some districts, I think, for instance, my brother is in Parkland School Division. I believe they have like an EduBlogs account which runs all their portfolios. That costs more money if you're going to pay for it, but that's another one that you may be interested. Jade was mentioning something around like where are these things hosted, especially when we start to think about the Canadian versus US versus Australian, etc. divide. Some Canadian provinces such as BC frown upon students' artifacts being hosted in spaces like the US, for instance. I did not know that EduBlogs hosted in Canada. I'd have to check with Sue Waters. I didn't realize that. I thought that was not happening, but if it is, that's great. I use a Canadian host for my own portfolio, CanadianWebHosting.com, which has been pretty useful. So EduBlogs is one, obviously. I'm going to put in a really quick, or if you can grab the this link. If you want to create like a very basic WordPress blog / portfolio, I'm going to just share a Google Doc here, or Katya is going to share a Google Doc with you with some very basic instructions on how to create a e-portfolio. We're just going to find it in a second, and you'll see what you see on the screen here. Also, and I just want to get into some of the social media cautions, and I'm hoping that we can get in a bit of a discussion here. Now, I know a lot of you are active on Twitter. I think one of the reasons that you got here is active on Twitter. And I think one of the most important pieces here is deciding what to participate in. So for instance, just recently, I want to share this whole document. So this is just an example of something I saw tonight. It was, The Onion. I'm actually a big fan of The Onion for the most part. And I saw this particular piece, and it says, "No way to prevent this, says only nation where this regularly happens." And so this was a bit of a satire on a very sad situation in the U.S. with the recent shooting. This particular blog post, and this is actually something that tweet. For instance, what does it mean? And I think this is really an important question when we talk to students, because I think a lot of students, we talk about what students post online, that they shouldn't post unfavorable stuff. But I wonder, what other question is, like many social media policies, for instance, talk about like if you tweet or if you like something or if you retweet something, you're endorsing it. So sometimes the assumption is you're endorsing something. Some people, for instance, might find this particular piece, and sometimes other things from like The Onion, for instance, as a little bit unfavorable, or it's making, it's too soon to be joking around, things like this. Maybe it's okay because it's a bit of a satire, but things like this. And I guess this may not be the best example, but sometimes when they're questionable, yeah, like good hashtag, the idea of too soon. Is this a time to bring up political pieces? Is this a jab at the U.S. in many cases? Could a Canadian, retweet this? What would that mean? I'm sure some people would be upset by even saying something like this. And so I think that's important, that even things like that we take for granted is really kind of an important thing that we really consider about what we tweet. Another good example of this is, because of this, there's a hashtag, and how many people followed the Yes All Women hashtag? Did you see this at all? And if you haven't, you should. And it's been really popular. Yeah, so some of you are saying it's amazing and this sort of thing. But it's really interesting that I noticed that, it becomes a gender thing, and it was certainly difficult to even discuss. And so people put that in, there was some really favorable tweets from men who were reading this and talked about how they sort of really started to appreciate some of the issues that women face on a daily basis, and I think this is really important. And this came out of the bloodshed and this piece, and I think it's really important. Other men and other women as well were sort of downplaying the importance of this hashtag, and there were certain things that were said in negative spaces. And so I can imagine that there would be our young people. So if we think about our high school students, we can think about middle year students who sometimes come to these spaces, and they may say things that are racist or misogynist or or a bad taste. And I think it's really, really important to discuss, because once you hashtag something, once you basically take a tweet, respond with a hashtag, your little bit of identity is all over the place. And so I think it's really, really, really important to start talking about these particular things, like what happens to your identity when you participate in these spaces, and how do we actually approach these things? Sometimes, is it necessary to engage in these things if you're unsure of how to engage in these things? Well, Carola, I think that's an important thing. If you delete the tweet, people can screencast. You can find it later, but sometimes, depending on the severity of the tweet, people will screencast it. So, for instance, there's a good example. I'll see if I can find it. Lost job in Africa. Here's a really good example. So, for instance, and I'm assuming this has been screencast a number of different places. This was just recently. I'm going to see if I can find it. So there was a New York City PR rep that recently, let's see if I can find this here. One that actually has, yeah, the woman on the airplane, exactly. So here's an example of, a tweet kind of gone wrong. So here's an example of a woman who got onto a airplane, and you can actually see in that particular article the tweet that she tweeted, very, incredibly insensitive. So she got onto a plane, she tweeted, see if I can find it, going to Africa, hope I don't get AIDS, just kidding, I'm white. Really, really bad decision. You can actually see it in the start frame of that video. Incredibly bad decision. She was flying from the U.S. to a part of Africa, and and she was supposed to be a PR rep, so someone who's fairly well versed with Twitter and media, exactly. So when you look at something like that, by the time she had landed, and the hashtag became "Has she landed yet?" or has Justine landed yet? Became the hashtag. And so by the time she got off the plane and pulled up her phone, she had been, she had seen thousands and thousands of tweets. She had seen, she had become this huge joke across the world, and it was just quite something. You're right; it was trending instantly. So I think that's really important. If she had not, once you've done this, it's really important to understand that one little tweet can really destroy a lot of the things that you're building in terms of your, there is a bit of a mob for sure around this, and I think that was really kind of an important piece. So this is something that I think is really, really important to discuss, things like this and how a simple tweet like this, and you can all of a sudden be, from obscurity to someone, and I think that's really an important thing. Think toward first, tweet later, really important stuff. So this is, something that doesn't happen every day, but it is something that does happen, enough to think about this a lot with your students. So, before we go to the next piece, and we want to end up pretty quickly here, what do we miss in terms of, the types of things that that you'd like to do in terms of building digital, positive digital identities with students? Anything that you can think of, feel free to chat, or you can even put it into the slide as well. What sort of things? It's echoing. There. How about now? Is it echoing still? Check. If it's echoing, you may have more than one version of Blackboard Collaborate open on your desktop. Sometimes people go in there. Yeah. So there's a good question up there. So where are they posting that we don't know about? And for instance, if the book that was mentioned before, Dana Boyd's book on the idea of, sorry, what was it? It's Complicated. That particular book, for instance, it talks about, one of the first chapters talks about the idea that many teens, there's a bit of an exodus from Facebook because parents showed up. And I think that's a really important thing, is that teens don't necessarily want to be in the spaces that we create, that we know about. So I think that's a really important question. So yeah, you can get, if you haven't got the book, legitimately, I mean, you can actually get the book for free on Dana Boyd's site, dana.org/It's Complicated. Did someone else lose the audio? Yeah. And so things like Snapchat and Instagram, for instance, just created a new little feature that allows you to send private photos. And so it's getting a little bit of that, Instagram version out there. So downloading the book keeps failing. I'm not sure if it's just you. Looks like some other people have downloaded it. Tinder, yeah. And that was something that was mentioned last week. I actually went to, here, let's go to this, I'll see if I can find it on the web. So for instance, dating, and I think I mentioned this last week. So Tinder, if you're not aware of this is actually a good one to discuss and to think about it. Tinder is pretty much the #1 dating app out there. And I actually just visited a school in some students in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. And not one adult knew about Tinder, but about 4 or 5 high school students that were there all knew about Tinder. They said it was very popular. Their response was they don't use it locally. So the way this works is basically when you open this up, you find basically people, random people on this app, and you can basically like their picture, sort of like Hot or Not, I guess, or you can say you don't like them, and it's very much around looks. And then basically, if that person likes you as well, you can actually communicate with each other. So no one can communicate with one another unless you both mutually like each other. And so the kids at the school said that they don't do it in Prince Albert, for instance. They don't use it locally because everyone knows everyone there. But then when they go to, say, like to a tournament or something, they use, if they go to another community, everyone starts using it. So it's a very interesting idea that you're able to, and it's really for random hookups. Now, obviously, we don't know the severity or how often people are using it, or in many ways, we have to reserve our judgment for these things, and this is just a part of, a different way of meeting. But it's something that we need to know about, and it's sort of, it's an interesting phenomenon. There's more and more sites just like this. OkCupid is not quite the same. I mean, it could be used the same. It's just not in terms of how you choose someone. I guess it's a bit different. This is really based on geography. So if you use this app and basically you see people who are local because your phone tells people where you are. So when you open this up on your smartphone, it says you're in Toronto or Regina or wherever you are, and it'll actually try to set you up with people locally. And it's become the #1 dating app, and it's very much very popular in high schools for sure. Other things that, how many accounts of each platform do they have? The positives of digital citizenship, last night example of a kidnapped baby, for example. Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a great example. Last night, if you missed that story. Suggestions for getting parents on board with using social media in class. Modeling safe, responsible use is so important, but parents are often living in the past. And I think, I think that's a really good point. This is up on the board there, right over here. We're seeing that getting parents involved in social media has been very difficult in some spaces. I'm going to find something on Facebook. So I'll show you a Regina example. I'm not sure if I'll be able to see it, if you'll actually be able to see it. But Facebook pages are becoming still very popular. I'm going to see if I can find this particular version of it. Oh, I can't. Let's see. I found it. I'm not sure if we're going to show it. For instance, so there's a teacher in Regina, and she actually has a Facebook site called Hackle Hub, and that's her last name. And it's a Facebook site like I've never seen so many parents so incredibly engaged with the site. And she's a elementary school teacher. She uses this as a way to actually mitigate the identities of their students within Facebook, but in a closed Facebook group. And so things like that are actually really quite useful in many cases, where that's a way to get closer to parents when you start to use social media in a very controlled and careful way. I think that can be very positive as well. If anyone wants to show how that actually works, this Hackle, I'll try to find, I forget her first name at the moment, but she had a really great guide where she actually allowed, like, something that she gives to parents on how to access the hub, what kind of postings are there, the permission forms, in terms of, it's a Hackle Hub, but it's probably a private group, and it's actually H-A-C-K-E-L, and it's Hackle Hub, but it would be a private group only to those parents, right? But she did provide some materials for me that allowed me, like, this is how you actually set up something like this. So I can certainly provide that for you if you'd like. And it also includes things like the permission forms that you get from parents. How do you keep up to date with these new platforms? One of the best questions is ask a kid. I think it comes down to it. How do we address or approach teens to help them or educate them once they have posted? And I think that's an important piece. And that's something that we should. Some of these questions, honestly, I think we should start posting them to the Google+, because these are really good questions for the community to answer in many cases. What are the consequences for inappropriate online behaviors at school, at home? How are these being developed at school? I mean, we're seeing more and more responsible use policies versus acceptable use policies. This is something that in the guidelines for the province of Saskatchewan, for our digital citizenship guidelines, will be discussed certainly. School moderated spaces and social spaces, important. Okay. So actually, Kathy is actually, that Hackle Hub that I mentioned, you can actually take a look at the Hackle Hub, and I think it may give you some tips on how to do the same Facebook type thing as well. I'm not sure exactly what's there, or contact her as well. What responsibility do schools have for online behaviors that take place at home and spill into schools? That was exactly the same question that I talked about in Ontario today, and we really don't know. It's such a gray area. So for instance, one of the really important questions that came up today, so for instance, there's the idea of duty of care. So for instance, in the policy guide in Ontario that I looked at today, they were saying something like, if you have, so for instance, as teachers and admins and school authorities, you're supposed to put in your social media document something like, we do not, like a statement that says, we do not monitor our social media accounts 24/7, and we have specific office hours, like a 9 to 3 or something like that. And one of the reasons we speculate they're using it is the duty of care. What happens, for instance, if a student posts a suicidal note or something inappropriate after hours? And I think often, as much as we want to provide the duty of care, there's also litigious reasons that we have to be very careful in terms of how we use social media. So I think more and more places are starting to look at limited hours in the day in terms of when you can actually use social media. So I think that's really important to start to look at. Now again, I think one of the most important things here, hopefully, I'm hoping that we can continue to connect, explore, and learn together. I'm going to put one more link up there, and this is pretty simple. It's simply to our hub. So if there are questions missed please post those questions, those burning questions that you have around all this. And I know we can answer these questions together. So this is what this whole MOOC is about. It's not about me having all of the answers. It's not about any individual having the answers. It's about all of us together making sense of digital citizenship. And so I'm hoping that people who have these questions, who are looking for specific policies, specific solutions, post it to the Google Plus forum, or post it to Twitter, whichever you most prefer, or both if you'd like, and see how we can get some questions, some of these questions answered. We're just about at the end of the session. We usually leave within, by the time it's 10:30. I guess it's 8:30 where you are, 10:30 where I am. I want to thank you for coming tonight. You've been a great, great audience and participants, and it was great to see so many of you actively engaged in the conversation. So thanks so much for coming. If you have any questions for us, you can email us at dcmooc@gmail.com, which will get us all of us. Thanks for participating, and of course we'll see you with the hashtag in the Google or in the Google community. And thanks for coming tonight. I hope it was worth your time. Take care, and I'll turn off the recording. All right, thanks again.